Well, welcome everyone to the Carbonate Campfire Friday night film. I trust you've enjoyed the Kiss the Ground movie you've just finished. We've been busy chatting amongst ourselves about what we're going to talk about. We've all seen the film, and we're really excited to be here to share some, or dare I say, insight or stories or a bit of chit chat amongst ourselves. And I hope you find that of some value. I just wanted to start by saying that I'm in Wiradjuri country here in New South Wales. It's a large part of New South Wales, and the Indigenous people and culture here have been here for 50,000 years, and I've only been here for 50 years, so I have a hell of a lot to learn from them, especially. Now, I just want to introduce our panel. I'll start with Rachael Treasure. Rachael is an award-winning author. I've actually got a couple of your books in my shelf there, Rachael. And they're fantastic. Thank you. Rachel's an amazing storyteller and currently living in Tasmania. She is a wonderful storyteller, so which is pertinent given the amazing story we just saw a minute ago. You guys just saw Khory Hancock, the environmental cowboy, usually seen without his shirt on. He is a well-known public speaker, attending conferences, and is a bit of a movie maker too, Khory, I understand, doco maker, something in the pipeline there.
Yeah, trying.
Of course, Helen McCosker and Mike McCosker, both farmers near Inverell. Helen, not Helen, Mike's literally just jumped off a harvester and run inside to join the conference after a bit of light rain. And last but not least, Tammi Jonas down there in Victoria. We hadn't had that "how are you going in Victoria" conversation, but we probably will. Tammi was you're one of the founders of the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. You were a chair there for a while. No,
I'm not actually one of the co-founders. No, I've just put my hat in for the 7th year as president, but I was not there in the beginning.
President. There you go. And they're at Jonai Farm, which I've been to many years ago with Joel Saladin, and it's amazing. So if you're in Victoria and you love yummy food, track Tammi down. Helen, I might just jump to you just to give us a bit of a rundown on why we're here. What was the significance? What was the impetus for putting together tonight's film?
Yeah, look, it's been just such an amazing journey for us. So just to give everyone a little bit of a background of me and Mike. Mike's actually a 4th generation farmer, and I was a greenskin. Didn't really know anything about farming. I actually lived in a little country town up in Theodore in central Queensland, but I was a greenskin and married Mike and became a farmer's wife. But we've been in this sort of space for 15, 20 years, and I think that what I was really seeing and through our journey is that the storytelling and the way that we connect with each other is the most important thing to reach out and create awareness. And I think there are so many beautiful movies about regenerative agriculture and regenerative communities. So we were really lucky because we got some funding through Parks Shire Council and the Australian Government's Drought Relief Fund. So we felt like it would be a really wonderful way, rather than just supporting farmers only, that we could actually support all the foodies as well, or to interact in get involved in for people, for our audiences, which is very foodies, farmers. You might know about regen or you have no idea. This was a really wonderful way for people to, the storytelling, which is just fantastic. So that was sort of the idea. And I think that what we're wanting to do with the film festival is to just we'll show a film until we run out of films or people get sick of them. So every Friday night we have a film to show, and it was quite incredible because like a week after we decided to do the film festival, I heard that Kiss the Ground were doing screenings. And so I jumped on the bandwagon, and I think that they only just started, like yesterday was the first day that they were doing live screening. So we were in the box seat. So that's really amazing. And look, we've had this is our fourth film that we've put on, and we've had some really great, I think we've sold over 1,300 or 1,400 tickets over the 4 movies. So that's a pretty good outcome, considering that we sort of had, we didn't do much promotion and had a pretty small budget. So yeah, we're really happy with it. And in terms of, I suppose, I'd also like to just give a bit of a plug for Carbonate. Carbonate's a charity that Mike and I are the co-founders of. And Mike, did you want to have a little spiel about Carbonate and share your little...
Yeah, so we've been working in this space of trying to manage natural resources better and help farmers do it in a way that works together with nature rather than fighting against nature. And when we first started, it was called biological farming and then, sustainable farming, and now we're talking about regenerative farming. To us, it's been all the same thing. It's about working together with nature and really helping nature bloom, which then really supports us as farmers anyway, and makes this amazing food that supports anybody that eats it. So when we first started the charity, it was really a case of looking at how the community were trying to help farmers that at that time were already in drought, and the response from the city was magnificent. Although we felt that there was more that we could do, rather than just buy a bale or buy a food. The natural systems on the farm, so the farms were more resilient, and that's where carbonate came into it. Carbon in the soil is a really excellent barometer of how the rest of the ecosystem might be running. And over time, our carbon levels have been moving down in the soil in this modern farming practice that a lot of farmers are currently using, forgetting about nature. And so as we swing people's attention back to how nature's responding to what we're doing, and we change what we're doing, we know that we can build that carbon level back up in the soil and rebuild that resilience. In fact, Carbonate says, take heart, because the Earth's ability to restore has been vastly underestimated. And we've seen that many times. As soon as you change your practice on the farm, the natural response could be quite amazing. So we wanted to share that information with foodies and also with farmers to get that change out on the farm.
And Helen, where are you guys currently? What country are you on?
Yeah, so we're from Gamilaroi country. We're based in northern New South Wales. We call our place Heaven on Earth, and we're just near Inverell. So we actually have been in drought, as many of us have been for the last 2 years, and it's been quite astonishing to see the incredible landscape just transform in front of our eyes. Last night, actually for the first time in 4 years, we heard the frogs croaking. Where do they come from? Isn't that amazing that we could have no frogs for 4 years and then they just arrive? I think that's extraordinary. So it's just such a beautiful, to see the green in the landscape. It's just such a therapeutic colour, to have been in brown for so long. So yeah, that regeneration, take heart, for the Earth's ability to regenerate is really, really, we're really feeling it right now. We're very grateful for the beautiful green that we're seeing. Mm-hmm.
Well, lots of green behind you there, Helen. Is that your paddock behind you there, Mike? Is that just a photo of your paddock?
Yeah, and that one's me out there with the hoe.
That's you.
No chemicals.
That's work. That's heaven on earth right there. Rachael, can I throw to you? Helen mentioned a number of times about storytelling. You're a wonderful storyteller. Can you tell us a story about the role that storytelling plays for you, but I guess as importantly in the movement of regenerative agriculture or this working with nature paradigm that we're talking about?
Well, thank you, Charlie. Well, hello, everyone. I'm in Palawa country, and so I just want to acknowledge our original owners of this landscape. That's down in now Tasmania. So my storytelling comes from the grassroots up, like literally. Daniel and I are restoring 100 acres, and it's probably the longest continuously farmed country in Australia, near Richmond in southern Tassie. Most people have been to our old convict bridge, and I'm a convict descendant, but we know that this brutal whitefella landscape is just nothing like what was here. So Dan and I are working to restore that ecology, and I'm studying a Bachelor of Science as well in regenerative ag alongside my partner Dan. So all of that kind of hands-on science stuff also I guess backs what I'm condensing into my novel writing. So I started 20 years ago with a book called Jillaroo. That book looked at succession planning, where most farms are passed down to boys, men, which is kind of my story, long story. But I've just found, after meeting Colin Seiss in 2009, if you've seen 2040, he's the pin-up poster boy with the big dangling roots between his legs. So if you've seen 2040, that's my man. He's a character in my book, The Farmer's Wife. That's one of my books. So I meet all these amazing people, including our animals and our working dogs and my horses, and weave them into story. For example, Clean Skin Cowgirls, I was getting labelled as a rural romance novelist, so I decided to write about sewerage and the potential as a renewable fuel resource. So my characters kissed by the sewerage ponds, but then they have biodigesters to, So my role as a novelist is to bring all this science and ancient feminine wisdom, which is something I study as well, about the ancient and the goddesses. There are no male gods of agriculture, only female. And I want to stand in sisterhood to lift other women up, and that's what my novels aim to do. So that's I'm on a mission, and I'm on a fun mission. So because I'm inside on Hemingway, this is my writer's chair, or I'm out in the paddock. So I'm a blessed woman.
You go, girl.
And Rachael, yeah, well done, Rachael. With social media being such a big part of storytelling nowadays, I mean, what sort of role do you see farmers playing in telling stories? Other farmers, their products, their lives. I mean, how big impact can that play?
Well, I think somebody like Gabe Brown, who we just saw in Kiss the Ground, he's influenced me just by I've gone to his workshop. We've put together kind of how you're going seed drill. So on our place, and we're about to sow multi-species cropping like Gabe showed in the movie next week down here in Tassie. So there's storytellers like him. There's people like Nicole Masters, who wrote For the Love of Soil. She's a New Zealand superhero of mine. So that I think people will hear story from different sources. A lot of blokes pick up my novels. One fella picked up my latest novel, White Horses, and he came up to me at Henty Machinery Field Days, big field days on the mainland, as we call it, and he said, Rachel, I've read your book twice and I'm going home to change my management. Now, that book was inspired by Di and Ian Hegarty from Western Australia. The property in that book was inspired by those regen farmers. So I think collaboratively we can all share our own story. There's also people that like to fly under the radar. Some people like to get their shirts off, not mentioning any names, but however we do it, whether it's how you shop is telling a story about yourself and your life and your family, and how you interact with people every day, because people in regenerative agriculture or holistic agriculture have to come to terms with that 5-year-old child within themselves that chucks Teddy out of the cot. So I think a lot of people that come to this place of recognising holism and seeing everything from above and the planet from above, they've done a lot of inner work, which is something as a novelist I want to touch people's hearts so that they change their paradigms in their mind, because our minds get a little bit 4x4 road tracked in there. So So storytelling can reach people from all different ways. And telling your stories to your kids, that's the most important one, the positive stories.
I'm for me, the community side of, if you look at Charlie Massey's 5 landscape functions, and the 5th one that he references being community and sort of the social side of it, I mean, that for me, and that's what I'm seeing and hearing, and people are telling me that, that's one of the biggest, that's been the catalyst for life-changing decisions, that they're around supportive people. It's very collegiate. Mentors everywhere, some great Facebook pages, the Regenerative Agriculture group page. You drop a question in there, and within an hour you have 50 comments of people trying to help. But the generosity of spirit and of wisdom is amazing, and I think it's a really good reflection on, dare I say, the types of people, the quality of the people who gravitate to this sort of thing. And that's not to say that people who haven't gravitated are any better or worse. It's just, people have to be ready for this stuff, and when they are ready, and they take that opportunity to share and to be in some ways pretty vulnerable about their past and really curious about their future, I think that it presents a pretty compelling story to get involved.
Charlie, may I add something to that community aspect, because this is something that's very dear to our hearts, just in our rural community with coming through the drought. And what we really saw was that when you come together as a community, that's actually when real change can happen. And it's like the diversity in the soil. Like if you're in a diverse, a wonderful, a thriving community, then you'll, a community that connects with each other, then you thrive. And if you're in if you don't have any relationships, almost like a monoculture crop, you don't have, it's like a social distancing, a social distance plant that doesn't have any connection. And then compared to a thriving multi-species crop that's full of diversity and fun and, lots of critters in the soil, that's actually what it's about. So that's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing that gets Mike and I up in the morning, I think. And
there are so many parallels between regenerative ag, this style, working with nature sort of agriculture, and human health, as you say, whether it's at a community level with resilience and diversity or biodiversity of people. And then, that's exactly what happens in the soil. It's the same thing. It's the biodiverse ecosystem, synergistic ecosystem under the ground and above the ground. Tammi, I'm going to jump to you now. I want you to tell us about agroecology as not different to, but just a different way of explaining or describing or referencing regenerative agriculture. Why is that term more appropriate for you, do you think?
Well, for me, I mean, Charlie, you know how political I am, and agroecology. That's why I asked you the question. And agroecology is it's a science, it's a set of practices, and it's a social movement. And so it's not just the methodology of farming. And I think that regenerative agriculture sometimes, not always, gets left in just a change of practices in your actual farming, really positive ones that are wonderful, and we saw heaps of that in the film tonight, but it doesn't always stray into the political need to collectivize and to value and honor what you were talking about before, this farmer to farmer knowledge sharing, which is a feature of regenerative agriculture as well as agroecology. We're moving away from the top-down notion that there are experts and there are input suppliers who we need to turn to as our gurus. The gurus now is your neighbor. It's somebody who you see results. We're all looking to each other for the expertise. And I think that whether you call it regen ag or whether you call it agroecology, that is a feature of the system. But agroecology goes one step further and says, we want democratic decision making in the hands of the peasants and the indigenous peoples. And these people have been farming in these ways for millennia. And it's actually only really the last 100 years that essentially the colonial class screwed it up so badly. And that's my only critique really of the, well, it's probably not my only, but a critique of the film is that lack of acknowledgement that a lot of what farmers like us are doing is simply recovering lost knowledge, or discovering knowledge that's been sitting there and not acknowledging it either. And I think, again, in regen ag circles, sometimes I think people forget to acknowledge those who came before. And I don't think that in agroecology we do. That's a movement that's led by Indigenous peoples and peasants all over the world, and is being promoted as the way to, in no small terms, save the world. And so, that's why I prefer agroecology. I like that it's political. I like that it's a social movement, and I like that it's about all of us and not about the big guys.
Well, it makes perfect sense that we need to learn, and we do learn from the cultures that were essentially living on the planet and, stewarding the planet with great success and working with nature. So to ignore that wealth of knowledge and experience would be really foolish, and that's essentially, I guess what industrial agriculture did for all those years. They just put that to one side completely, went straight, all about the science and the measurables, as it were, and the things that made sense and could be measured, and the sort of the reductionist mindset that they put in place, which was which has resulted in some pretty ordinary results. Talking about mindset, can I go to you, Khory, just about Indigenous mindset shifting? I know that's a passion of yours. Can you sort of tell us what that means and what?
Yeah, definitely, Charlie. But before that, I feel like I need to clear the air a little bit here. There's been a few comments about taking shirts off and no names mentioned, but I think we all know who is taking off their shirt. I just want to let everyone know that's on the line that there's always a purpose for taking off my shirt, mental health, you name it. I just thought that I'd clear the air straight up with that one before I got into any further.
I thought everyone was talking about me, Khory. You? Oh, sorry.
And Khory, can I just say that to reach the mainstream media is so difficult, and I've found I've had to do the same. I wrote a book called 50 Bales of Hay after 50 Shades of Grey came out to try and empower women. So I fully salute your beautiful intelligence and your mind, and I think what you're experiencing is a lot of what women experience as well when you utilize other skills to just try and get this message across, because it is crucial what we're talking about tonight. So blessings to you, and take the floor, sir.
Take your shirt off.
No, I want Charlie's off.
No, I've got enough going. I might actually do mine up.
Sorry.
That's better.
I guess to start, Charlie, and everyone, to take it right back, I grew up on a cattle station in central Queensland, and with rock art all through, Aboriginal rock art all through our cattle station. I grew up looking at the beautiful handprints all over the wall, and my father was good mates with Graham Walsh, who was at the time Australia's greatest rock art expert. There was a theory, I need to be very careful about saying this, so he had a theory that the left hand placed on the sandstone wall was a symbol for giving power back to the earth, and the right hand was for receiving power, and that was done associated with burials, so the body would go back into the earth and they would receive power from the rock on the sandstone wall in return, which is more of a symbol of taking food, taking resources from the land, and now they're giving that energy back. In every Indigenous culture around the world, they have a similar principle, like the Lion King circle of life. In the Native American Indian culture, they have a saying there where your blood when you die and your blood returns to the rivers and the oceans and your bones to dust, it is then that you will remember that the land does not belong to you, that you belong to the land. That's deeply embedded into every single Indigenous culture around the world, doesn't matter where you are. And that's because of that physical connection to land. That is a mindset in itself. I work with the traditional owners up here. I'm in northern Queensland, and they do call-outs to wherever we go water monitoring. I'm an environmental scientist, do a lot of water monitoring around site. I take the traditional owners with me. They do call-outs to their ancestors into the bush. So when their body goes back into the earth, they believe that their conscious, their energy goes back into the earth, and their spirits are still there. They can access their ancestors through that, through the nature. So it is the bridge between those spiritual realms, essentially. And that to me is the type of principle. They value themselves as a part of nature, not above it. And Charles Massey talks about this in his book, is that when we came in, the European culture came in and absolutely dominated the Indigenous, slaughtered them completely. We applied that same mindset of complete domination to agriculture, to nature. And we need to go back the other way somewhat. We need to value nature the same way that the Indigenous used to. That is the single biggest principle that we can do, because everything off the back will come off that. So what Kiss the Ground didn't touch on so much is that it works very well in small scale farms. We have a lot of large scale areas, and we need to really scale that up. How do we scale that up? The fastest way to do it is financial, to put a price on carbon so that we can start paying farmers to transition to renewable energy. We can do that through carbon offsets, carbon farming. There's a lot of different methodologies that we can do that. But it starts with that mindset. It starts with valuing nature. Carbon is the building block of life. The Indigenous understood that. They understood that if you looked after nature, you're looking after yourself, essentially. You're looking after your people and everything that you believe in, your spiritual well-being. And we don't. We value the physical side of it. We value the actual, the rocks and everything that we mine out of the ground, all our resources. They placed a spiritual value on it. But we can also place economic value on carbon and build that and pay. Like if we value carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the same way that we do gold or oil, we can learn how to draw it back down out of the atmosphere through ways like regenerative agriculture. There's a lot of different ways that we can do it, but we can draw it down out of the atmosphere. We can essentially mine carbon, but we have to place a value on it. And the way to do that is to change our mindset by aligning ourselves more with nature, aligning ourselves, learning about why the Indigenous feel the way they do, why they can access their ancestors. And it's not just about accessing ancestors, it goes so much deeper than that. They look at a tree and they can access knowledge and all the 40,000, 50,000 years that they've been on there, they can access everything. They can access data through that tree. They are the tree, essentially. Everything about that tree is them. And we don't have that mindset. We have the mindset that we are above nature and we can completely dominate it. So that's why I'm so passionate about it, is that I really believe deeply in that spiritual value, and I believe that that spiritual value can be transferred to our economic system, so we can essentially flip the model. We are flipping the model and basing our economics on the regeneration of nature and not regeneration. I hope that made sense.
Totally. Khory, is there some sort of books or links or websites or things where our viewers can learn more about I guess the Indigenous context, at least in Australia?
I honestly think that Charles Massey's book really explained it pretty well in that first couple of chapters. He really aligned that mindset and how we've come in with European convict culture and dominated nature, but then he turns it back around to how the Indigenous did it. And Dark Emu, Bruce Pascoe's book, and that's more about food production, but it's also that same mindset. Like they align themselves with nature. They align, all their methods were going with nature, and learning about it, not against it. So I think, I don't know if anyone really talks about this so much as what I really like to. I think it's a really new concept. I honestly believe that Charles Massey did it really well. So people need to really read his book to understand it more, and read Bruce Pascoe's book. And also Fire Country by Victor Stephenson, the newest one that's come out. I've read that, and it's exactly the same. He learned off the Indigenous elders up here in northern Queensland about how to manage fire better up in these type of areas, which can be applied all over Australia. So I think just learning, getting alongside these guys, learning, reading the books. There is knowledge out there. It's limited, but there is knowledge. You just have to get it, and it's getting more out there now. It's getting more prevalent. But in the past, it's not part of their culture to write something, to document something. It's more part of their culture to pass it down, and that has been broken, obviously, with culture. It hasn't been passed down as well because of interracial and our culture coming into it. So, but there is still stuff out there, I think, and those books, Fire Country, Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu, and Charles Massey's book called The Reed Warbler, that's a really good start.
Can I give my podcast a quick plug, Helen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Everyone should be.
Too late now. You just happened to mention Charlie Massey. Well, Khory actually is one of my first interviews I did. He's out there. He's been released. He's live. And Charlie Massey, a two-parter, went out about a month or so ago too. So for those who haven't listened, the Regenerative Journey, he does touch on a lot of the Indigenous context of his land down there, and it's some pretty horrifying stories. Now, Helen, actually, no, I'm just going to throw it open to anyone. What do you think, for those viewers who aren't necessarily farmers, but, I mean, eat food, so that must be everyone else and farmers, I guess. Those who can't necessarily, make an impact in this way by growing food, in a farming scenario, so our foodie friends, what do you think they can do to make an impact, to make a positive change, to engage and not necessarily advocate this, but just actually, do stuff on the ground and make a difference? Who wants to have a crack at that?
I'll have a go at that.
Anyone?
Yeah.
Mike, shoot.
Part of my story is actually about with chemical poisoning, and obviously that impacted my health quite dramatically, and the restoration of my health actually came through change of diet, and that gave me a tremendous awareness of the importance of food and how we grow our food. And I think, just touching on a couple of points that Khory raised, which I think are really, really powerful points, the mindset that we hold around this whole equation, this story, it's pervasive across all of society, in that sometimes we're frightened of nature. We can be frightened of the critters that we encounter in nature, or we can be frightened of what appears to be diseases or impacts from nature that we don't have any control over. And if we can let go of that fear and actually reconnect to the natural system and to the beauty and the bounty of that, it's a really powerful process. And there is a lot that foodies can do. Khory picked up this aspect of helping to change the economics of our food system. Well, the foodies actually have that control in their hand. When people go into the grocery store, where they place their dollars gives a really big signal back to farmers. And if we look at the food in the grocery store and we read the labels, and Charlie, one of your favourite sayings is, know who your farmer is. And if you can't work out where that produce has come from, who's grown it and how they've grown it, I think we need to demand that information in our food system. That way we can be sure that we're getting good quality food and that it's grown in a way that works with nature and looks after our environment at the same time. We change those food signals. I can tell you farmers will change very quickly. Farmers are very innovative, and they're very, what we've been doing in conventional agriculture is to try and turn it into a business. So a lot of these farmers are very business oriented. If you change the economic signals in their business, they will change their business fairly quickly as well. And then they'll be looking for the sort of information that we're trying to share with them now from our previous experience. And that experience in my situation came from the negative impact of chemicals, but other people have come to it for different reasons and have different experience to share. And that's why this community of sharing becomes really important and really powerful. And I believe that the foodies hold the key to unlocking this whole movement. Anyone else?
Can I add to that too? The study that I'm doing for my latest novel reveals so much in the sense that if it's labelled organics, it's not necessarily from living soil. So, and some of the organic chemicals that are registered on the Australian medical and veterinary site is actually just as toxic. So I think foodies need to be really careful of believing labels, and so that you do need to go to the farmer source. And also to the power of community. I know, Helen, you mentioned that earlier, but my next book is about a girl in Tassie, and she's so cross with her family who are dairy farmers that she turns vegan. And in the little town of Tassie, in northern Tassie's very parochial, a lot of hunting, shooting, fishing. And so the bakery closes down. Now, the bakery would have all this sort of wheat that we're consuming now that is so chemically dense and causing terrible disasters with glyphosate going through our systems. So the bakery closes, and the greasy takeaway food closes, and a cat cafe opens up and a vegan cafe. So I've, condensed all these issues, community and social issues, into a novel to try and help people understand that as community, if we become informed and we share information, particularly farmers who know their stuff about chemicals, if we can share that with our beautiful foodies who are wanting to support us, then I think we can grow something really exciting at a local level. So go in and talk to people. Ask, are these eggs free range? Simple as that. Are they not just free range, but have they been fed pasture? You saw Gabe Brown's eggs in those, not his eggs, he wouldn't have eggs, but you know what I mean, his chicken's eggs, and he's poking the yolk. We can, it's those kind of things, and I just, to have this meat versus plant kind of headbutting it's not going to solve anything. I know that the lettuce farmer next door to us, he's a corporate lettuce farmer. They have to kill everything to get you your bag lettuce. They have to kill mice. They look over the crops with infrared. They have to kill lizards. They have to keep birds off over, from soaring overhead from the lettuce leaves. So, sorry, I'm sounding very passionate, but I'm a novelist. But in saying all of this, the science behind it is terrifying, really, when you look at what they're doing to our, big agribusiness. I think in 2016, agribusiness earned $60 billion versus, that's globally, versus farmers who earn about $8 billion. So you've got $60 billion going to the corporates, the seed companies, chemical companies, and then $6 billion to the farmers who are barely making $1. Like you look at Gabe Brown's farm. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. But I don't know if that's probably terrified everyone. So they're going to go into the major supermarket and go, which is what I do. God, where do I go? Like I say that we live in a pure food famine here in Tasmania, and we're meant to be the clean green state, but that's it's not so.
I know, Tammi, you're about to explode with
Go, Tammi,
comments.
go.
I want you to go.
Yeah, so hi, I'm your resident anti-capitalist, and I just have a few things to say. To Khory, you had me. I was with you on Indigenous ways of being with land, and I'm working on that in my PhD at the moment. And then when we start talking about capitalizing on that, I think that is not at all an Indigenous mindset to think about how to place economic value on something that is of deep spiritual and material and metaphysical value. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, in a society that is capitalist and finds ways to value things with money, value the right things. I think that's the point you're trying to make. And I don't disagree with that as an iterative improvement on where we are. But it's not the end game. The end game is, for me, that we are with land, and we are caring for and with land and animals and plants and microbes, because we are, as you said, just part of that ecosystem, and it's the right thing to do. And we nourish ourselves from that land, and we take as much as the land can offer to form our livelihood as well, but we don't take more than that. And this idea that we get paid for ecosystem services is a deeply capitalist notion. And instead, we should be able to, make a decent livelihood and care for country at the same time. So, and actually, I think Rachael then made the point where when we talk about the amount of money that agribusiness takes and the input suppliers take compared with the farmers, they are all over the natural capital accounting now. Like they're way ahead of us hippies. Like they're going to cash in on this well before anybody who's actually tapping into Indigenous cosmologies. They're going to make money. They already are making money from it well before we can. And it's one of the things that worries me about Paul Hawkins' stuff about drawdown, that I love so much of the drawdown work that he's done. And I know Charlie Massey's worked really closely with him, but again, a lot of that is about how to place economic value on things, which will just take us. Seaweed farming will just become the next monoculture in oceans. All of these afforestation of monocultures of plantations, which our government is using in their carbon accounting on the global account ledgers. They're saying because we plant all these plantations that we will then cut down in 10 years, we can meet our carbon sequestration kind of requirements under the Paris Agreement. And it's rubbish. It's rubbish accounting. And it's not actually the solution at all. The solution is that's why agroecology is preferred for me too, because it's very explicit about problems of financialization of nature and the need to have diversity in ecosystems, because that's how you sequester carbon, and that's how you nourish livelihoods of humans and non-human parts of the ecosystems. So I'll stop there. I could go on.
I'm just conscious of the time. We've got probably 15 minutes to go, or a little less. I just wanted to touch on the role of women in agriculture and regenerative agriculture or agroecology. In my view, is that's the secret sauce. That's the real. They're the real powerhouse to make things happen, because they do in a situation. I mean, I'm talking about a generic husband-wife situation. I know there's lots of the women. They run. Men, we've got to be honest with ourselves. They run the show, and when they get on the bandwagon, and when they gather the information and they get behind these things, that's when things are going to shift. I mean, just look at Helen and Mike. Mike's the front man, but Helen's really doing all the work in the background there. Khory, I want to go to you. What's your view on women in agriculture?
It's a very good question, Charlie. I do a lot of study into the feminine mind versus the masculine mind. The masculine mind is about domination. I mean, we have completely, if you put it this way, women don't really start wars, and they don't have that physical violence, and that physical thing that men do is about domination. If we apply the more feminine mindset, which is also empowering to men, I feel anyway, to nature itself. And that's more about nurturing and feeling deeper, lowering the ego, and then understanding nature more, like learning to understand it, learning to understand each other at a deeper level. Then that is where we need to head, and that can be very powerful as a man. If I understand my partner at a deeper level, if I understand her and not try and dominate her, then that can be very empowering for men, I feel. And it aligns yourself, your heart, your mind with everything in life. And it gives you a sense of freedom that I can't even describe. And so if I'm going to be vulnerable here and be a bit deep and personal about my life, I was an agro young man at 21. I was a good rugby player. I used to hit hard, and I had that ego. I had that that type of mindset, and it wasn't working because I was getting a really bad reputation, and I had a really bad breakup at one point in my life, and I just learnt that I had to change my ways in some way. Like this whole thing, I was being feared of being judged, but then I was acting in aggressive, egotistical sort of ways. And that's where I started the Environmental Cowboy. And actually, we're talking about Gabe Brown a lot. It was the Carbon Cowboys. He was part of the Carbon Cowboys. And so that's where the Environmental Cowboy came from. But that Environmental Cowboy image, even though it looks like a male stripper image to most people, it represents freedom to me. It represents everything that I've become because I had to learn how to be a better person. I had to learn to reduce my toxic masculinity, in that sense, my ego, align myself, and that was more aligning myself with my feminine side. We all have a masculine and feminine side. We just tend, because of our biochemical levels in our body, like more testosterone in men, more oxytocin in women, for example, we tend to have a stronger side. I think we need to be more in touch with both sides, both genders. And that masculine side has really been prevalent in Western culture, that masculine domination, and it's not the right way to go. And it doesn't offer yourself at a personal level a level of freedom that I have now, and I explored, and I'm not afraid of anyone or anything, and that's because I let my ego go, let a lot of that pride go, and align myself. So that's me being a little bit vulnerable and telling my story, but I'm hoping that it helps other people. And I don't know if I answered that question well enough, Charlie, but that was an off-the-cuff question. I just kind of rattled something off my head. So.
No,
that was a great response, Khory.
And yeah, you didn't answer the question, but it was actually better than I was looking for. So thank you.
Also, Charlie, I was going to say what it does is it parallels, I think, also your point about agriculture and the rejection of patriarchal industrial agriculture to embrace, this regenerative or agroecological future, which, we could argue comes from a kind of masculine to a more feminine drive. And what you've described, Khory, I think is, a kind of personal parallel of what needs to happen and is happening in agriculture. The move from dominion over the earth to being with and of the earth. And that's lovely.
Yeah,
well, I mean, a feminine trait is, one of the greatest feminine traits is nurturing, and that's what the earth needs. That's what, everything from a plant to the whole globe, that's what we need to do, is to nurture and let, I think as Mike said, let the earth heal. It has that ability. It has that adaptive, characteristic. So we just need to let it sort of heal itself, but just facilitating that and nurturing it. Sorry, Rachel, you were going to say?
No, I was just going to echo the sentiments that yeah, the patriarchy, when we say that, we're talking about, I call the guys that have woken up like Khory are the brotherhood of kind men. And we're existing under a flawed science of Darwinism that says survival of the fittest, and that is flawed. It's actually survival of the collaborators, and that's what soil does. It collaborates with plants. That's what Mother Nature does in all the systems. That's what our cattle and our sheep do. Even our sheepdogs collaborate with the livestock. Yeah, so the more we can collaborate and bring women into leadership, but the problem is we're bringing women into systems that were set up before women could vote, that was set up before women could have a say. So the banking, the legal, the property ownership systems, they're all systems that are fundamentally flawed. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we need women not to be emulating men. We need women to tap into Indigenous practices and culture. 5,000 years ago, the churches in Ireland all around Europe had the shield and the gig, so they're images of the woman's vulva, and that symbolises fertility. That symbolises the portal to life. Women in ancient cultures would raise their skirts to the seeds after they'd sown the crops. So women were fundamental to this cycle. There's ancient paintings of a man hunting and he's connected visually. So yeah. So with the woman, yeah.
Yeah. Can I add to that? I think that the point I was trying to make is Jacinda Ardern has a beautiful way of doing this, and you can see the difference between her and Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump will go to anger and...
now we're getting political, Khory.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Go there.
And I think it's something... There's something to be said. Can I just jump in there? It's probably one of the things that have been commented on Kiss the Ground is the bringing politics into this space is a little bit, what's the word, contentious.
Can I have
sorry.
I want a right of a right of reply to the old white males amongst us, and
it's the mind.
Oh, it could be. So what I wanted to bring out here, I was saying that farmers are very adaptive and very innovative. And I think in this previous society that we've set up where men are out there doing it and sort of dominating, I think we haven't got a lot going for us sometimes. So we have to show everybody how smart we are. So we've been very clever in how we've been solving these problems with science and with things. And I think one of the things we can do is move out of this mental war that we have with nature, and even in, listening to, men have physical strength, we have energy to get out there and do stuff. Women bring in a nurturing and a fertility and a heart space. And in fact, I think in a good relationship, particularly where the men and women come into that relationship equally, what it does is it helps the man actually recognise that they do have a heart. And one of the things that we can do in society generally is to move out of our head and into our heart. And that will give us a lot greater connection. It will give us a lot greater connection in our own relationships. It gives us a lot greater connection within our community, and it will certainly give us a lot greater connection with nature as well. So we stop trying to solve all of these problems mentally and show everybody how clever we are, and instead come into a heart-based connection with everything, within our own relationships, within our community, and within our relationship with nature. We'll actually see through a lot of this mental construct that we've got out there.
Maybe it's head and heart. I can't imagine you going out in the field just with your heart.
But I'd have to agree with Mike in that, whether you're male or female, when we're using our head, more than we should, then we're looking for prescriptive solutions which are easy to just, mechanically, methodically sort of work towards, which is essentially, from my view, as a reflection of industrial agriculture. You go and buy a bag of something to put on because you know that A plus B equals C, and C is the result. And if I do these two things because the bloke at the shop told me, because I'm looking for that solution. Hey?
Sorry, Charlie. Sorry.
I didn't hear that. What was that? What's on behind me?
Helen's responding
then that's what.
You go on. Sorry, Charlie.
You'll have to put it in the chat. I'm still recovering. So that's the way the mind thinks. So I mean, in the world of biodynamics, which is where we sort of operate from some of the time, you know, it's about reconnecting with nature and listening and observing and you know, as I say, you know, nature's our most valuable business partner. And you know, I've used the word business because at the end of the day, we are in a business and we are in relationship with nature, and nature's not a resource. It's actually a partner to produce something that we have an intention to be good for ourselves. It's good food, it's good for the environment, and it's good for the planet. So I'm a big fan of the heart and that connection, and that you know, the being comfortable with what we can't measure, being comfortable with what we can't necessarily see, you know, and being really comfortable and open and curious about what we can feel. And I think that's what women do. They feel stuff, you know, and that's what I don't think men are doing enough of, you know. But having said that, when I talk to men, you know, Khory's just an example of it there now. When I talk to men, you know, who are in this space that we're talking about, then they are being vulnerable and they are being curious and they are feeling, you know, they're feeling you know, their own vulnerability. They're feeling their own responsibility of what they've done in the past, and they're feeling a sense of responsibility for the future. And I think that's what I'm learning from women. Tammi, I'm keen to hear what you have to say.
Did you want me to respond to this or to the question?
No, to the women in agriculture.
Well, I mean, I think we've actually covered quite well the women in agriculture in my experience.
No, I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, anecdotally, without data.
Tammi, can I, before you answer that question, could I jump in if that's okay and just speak from me being a mum and a farmer, living on a farm, and my experience of me seeing women, particularly farming women, who when they start having children, that's actually the point where they actually start realizing, you know, my kids were, when they were babies, we always ate organic food and from the garden, and, you know, and Mike was still using some chemical, and every time he would spray, this is going back 15 years ago, I would take the kids. I'd say, I'm going into town. I cannot be here with the kids while you're spraying. And then Mike and I'd be like, what, I'm taking my kids away and you're spraying food that people are going to be eating? Like, what's the disconnect with that? So, you know, when we bring, as a farming family that's producing food for us and our communities, then what are we growing? What is it that we're providing? You know, it's more than just a widget or a product. It's actually the food that we eat needs to be nutrient dense, and what as a farming family we put into that food, all of that love that is grown, no matter whether you're a small farmer or a big farmer or a big cropper, your intentions, and even if you can't get through that chemical thing and it's a hard road, if you have that intention of really wanting to do the very best you can on your farm, then that is power in itself, you know. So, and it's women, it's the mums that are working with their husbands or partners in this, you know, particularly when they're at-home mums, and they're like going, come on, we can't do this anymore. Come on, we need to look at things differently. And they're the ones that are, because they're at home and they can look up all of this information and reading books, and they're putting the seed, you know, they're giving the seed. I'm really lucky with Mike because he's been in this space. He actually, you know, we've been a wonderful, you know, connect, you know, he's known all this stuff, and I've learned much from him. But in my experience of meeting other women in this space, I think that's really, you know, women are really leading this space. They're really amazing. Yeah.
Actually, probably the most useful follow-on I can add to that, Charlie, is that women in the city are similarly affected by having children and decisions about what food they procure for their family. So certainly the small scale farmers that I work with all the time report that it's predominantly mothers of young children who are kind of having the awakening about not wanting chemical in their food and wanting it to be something that they won't poison their children with, that sort of lead the charge of choosing this kind of food. So I've spent too many years in and out of the academy to generalize based on my own lived experience, but I also know there's plenty of data to back up that women with children are definitely leaders in the I'm going to find local food produced without chemicals.
Yeah. And I might add to that as well.
Also your point, Helen, I think that as farmers' wives, farmer partners, I think there's something you can't dismiss about raising bodies in your body and then having them outside your body that makes you look after them in a way that's different to if you didn't have that experience.
Yeah, and I think that in the Kiss the Ground, in the movie itself, I think that the young woman with the kids, that was a really good sort of, I
met her in Torino at the Slow Food Terra Madre. That was weird.
Yeah.
But there was a question, Charlie, that Biggie gave us from the chat about how regen farmers tackle the issue of local governance and policies in place that don't reflect the practices of regenerative agriculture. We're treated like we're intensive. I won't go into any depth on this, but I will just say that the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance that I've been president of for longer than anybody should be, is working actively on issues around regulation and policies that are disabling factors for regenerative agriculture and agroecology and small scale agriculture. And we have a legal defense form that we created 4 years ago in response to these kinds of issues, and we managed to achieve significant reforms to pastured pig and poultry in Victoria, and we've achieved some much more minor gains, I guess, around food safety regulation of small-scale production. But we continue to chip away at it, and we've just finished today the 5 days of sessions of the Food Sovereignty Convergence, unconference sessions from each day, because we had to be online because industrial agriculture also brought us a pandemic. And so today's discussion was actually about regulations and small scale farming. And tomorrow we're having the plenary for anyone interested from 10 to 12 Eastern Daylight Savings Time. So Queensland, that's 9 to 11 for you. And we'll be talking about what's the Food Sovereignty Alliance going to do going forward in terms of continuing our lobbying efforts to fix the problems of regulation and trying to farm in the ways that all of us are trying to farm in. That stops, like things, we need legislation to stop supporting the shedding of pigs and poultry, the kind of ruthless application of chemical everywhere, and making small-scale pastured animal growing and lack of chemical application really hard to do in our legislative context.
It's interesting you say that, Tammi, because I guess there's a school of thought, that forget about government. We just got to do the work on the ground and make it happen, produce the food, maybe duck and weave and sort of get around these things. Is there some truth in that, or is that a valid thing, statement?
One of the things we say in AFSA is basically that we need to do both. So, the famous Buckminster Fuller quote about making the old system obsolete by building the new one. You don't fight against the old system, you make the old one obsolete by building the new one. And we say you have to do both. We say you build the new one and so that it becomes obsolete when you've basically crushed it at the same time as building the one so people have something to go to. So it's all well and good to say don't shop at the duopoly, but if people don't have anywhere else to shop, then what are we asking them to do? So we have to be building this new system, no matter how hard that is, at the same time that we're trying to reform the old one. And eventually we get to this happy place.
Can I just jump in there? And you know, when you're at school and you go to Ag Eco, you do your ecos or whatever, it's commerce at school, isn't it? And you talk about supply and demand, and that's the model. There's a supply and demand, and there's the two and the throwing the balance. You know, I'm a firm believer that the most healthy economies are those that are demand-based economy. You know, if we actually have people who want clean, healthy, nutritious food, then we will have farmers who will appreciate and understand that demand, and they'll meet that demand by producing it. You know, as a commodity farmer, as I used to grow stuff, and I had no idea who was going to buy it, and I wouldn't know until the day I sold it, pretty much. You know, and that was not a very good position as a farmer to be in. But from an eater's point of view, and this is, I guess, why we're, you know, Kiss the Ground has been shown and produced, and many other wonderful films, and why this particular panel is put together. You know, we're trying to create that demand for the foodies or the eaters to say, we want clean, nutritious food, and you know, you farmers are the ones who can grow it. And the bonus is you can actually save the planet at the same time. It's a wonderful win-win plus situation, as Stephen Covey would say. Rachel, there was a hesitation there a second ago. Did you want to add to that? Anything?
Oh, no, yeah, just to say thank you, Tammi, for taking on that food sovereignty, because we raise Allobird pole merinos. They're dual purpose merinos, so we don't mules, and we've only got small numbers, and we've got little Dexter cattle, and we mob graze, so we move them every single day, so we know them, and the system is such that we have to send them off the farm to be processed, and that is the worst day, and it makes me not want to be a grazing farmer. Whereas the experience we've had when we've had a butcher, he comes on board, he's aware of low stress stock handling, and he can put our animals down while they're in the field and completely unaware. It's still traumatic for me, but knowing that my babies aren't going on a truck and then getting put in a facility. But our butcher who came on farm, we can't sell that meat. We would get a fine, or we would go to jail if we sold that meat, because we're not allowed to stamp it. So that's the kind of stuff that that regen small producers are we're on the ground busy. So thank you, Tammi, for providing that energy behind that. Yeah, that structural change of everything.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And there is momentum behind the micro abattoir movement. So whether it's on farm or regionalized, cooperatively owned abattoirs, there's definitely momentum. America typically is 10 years ahead of us on this, and the pandemic has galvanized them to jump. They've gone so fast. The small scale processes have leapt ahead suddenly. We're still more in the ideas phase for most of us. There are very few on-farm or regionally owned abattoirs, but there are some, and you've got down in Tassie, actually, at Signet, you've got
Craddock Hill. Yeah, that's where we send our ones, and they've trained with Temple Grandin. So
that's right.
Yeah. So so we're lucky to have them, but I would rather my animals not leave the property.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think on-farm abattoir would be the dream for all of us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I should have given you this question on notice, everyone, but I didn't, so too bad. I'm just going to ask you, I don't know, someone could be courageous and answer it first. What question do each of you want to leave the viewers with and want them to consider? You know, what question do you want them to leave this tonight or tomorrow and ask themselves a question that you're going to tell us that would lead them, given what they've learnt tonight, given what they've seen on the film on Kiss the Ground, you know, because I always say to people, you know, one of the most powerful things you can do is ask yourself better questions, and you know, because as a farmer, a commodity farmer, I didn't ask enough. I asked my agent, what did it cost, you know, or how much do I need. You know, I didn't ask myself questions, you know, probing questions, courageous questions that led me to really honest, you know, answers that I wouldn't have, and no one else was asking me those things. So I just want, you know, people to think about, if you need a minute or two, that's fine, but just questions that you want to place on the table for our viewers, our listeners, for them to consider tonight, tomorrow, to get them, you know, a better question that we want them to ask themselves. Does anyone want to nominate themselves
to
answer that question without asking a question?
I've got one, Charlie.
Khory, I thought you would. Good.
Given that we don't have time, right, that climate change is really pressing upon us right now, how can we rapidly transition our hearts and our minds to become more aligned with nature to transition into regenerative agriculture practices?
Sweet. Say again, please, for those who didn't.
How can we rapidly transition our hearts and minds and our entire culture to shift towards regenerative agriculture practices?
Nice.
Yeah, and for me, I think I'd ask everyone, if we could live in a perfect world, what would your perfect world look like? Because there's absolute power in visualization. There's absolute power in imagining a future, and that's what I try and do with my novels. Is I create a fantasy world that could possibly become true. So the power of human imagination and also that collective consciousness. So I look at my sheep and how they move. They have a collective consciousness. We do as well. So what, in your perfect world, what would it look like? And be grateful. That's another thing. Gratitude is a daily practice. And you're never grumpy if you're grateful.
Yeah, totally. Gratitude is the antidote of fear. Who wants another crack at the question?
I'm happy to. I think the McCoskers should definitely go last since they've hosted all of us so graciously. I would say ask yourself, how can I join a collective that will actually have some kind of power to make change? So whether it's something like the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance or your local land care group or whatever you want to lock the gate, whatever you want to get behind. You know, the bastards have the money, but we have the numbers, but we don't have the numbers unless the numbers sign up to actually give us the lobbying power we need to make the changes. So what are you joining tomorrow? Tonight even.
Yay.
To make sure your voice is there.
Okay. Well done, Tammi. McCoskers?
I'm going to respond, what Rachael said about visualization and consciousness is really, really powerful. And Helen said at the start that we call our farm heaven on earth. And one of the things that we used to do and still do when we have time is to sit on the front veranda when we're having a cup of tea and ask ourselves the question, so what does heaven look like? Look at our farm and is this what heaven looks like? Can we create heaven in a better fashion? So if you're visualizing what this perfect world would look like, let's remember that people generally are good people. And it's easy for us to create enemies out there of corporations and big chemical farmers. But let's just leave that old system to be irrelevant. Let's create this new system of I know where my eggs come from. In fact, when we were in town the other day and we shop at a little store called Funky Monkey because it's organic produce and local produce. And I bought eggs there and my little 9-year-old said, why are you buying these eggs? And I said, because they're the best eggs that we can buy. They're produced by Derek and Fiona, and we know the farmers that produce those eggs. And I would much rather buy my lamb from somebody like Rachael, who cares so deeply for her animals, than the Woolworths butcher. Not because the Woolworths butcher is a bad person, but because the corporate infrastructure that's been put around him actually hides him from us. The corporate infrastructure that we've set up depersonalizes everything. Well, let's repersonalize it and let's get to know the people that are looking after the land. Let's get to know the people that are producing our food. And that way we're now connecting through our hearts with our community. So next time you're in the grocery store or next time you're sitting around the kitchen table, ask yourself, who's my farmer and what does my heaven look like?
Oh, Mike, you just stole mine. Damn.
You stole mine too. Sorry.
You stole mine.
No, that's fine. I'm glad you did. I'm rather you than anyone else, Mike. Helen.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Charlie. I know that is your line, who's your farmer, and you've been out there, really connecting people to that question, and it is a really awesome question to have in your mind.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Helen.
Yeah, and I'd just like to frame my question with just a little story that I really wanted to share with our audience. And it was very powerful for me and Mike because it's when we first started Carbonate and we were doing that crazy thing that you do with charities to try and get awareness and, you're beating the drum. And we were down in Sydney at a coffee shop and we met up with this amazing woman, Carolina Botta. If you're listening, Carolina, she really wanted to help us. She's been a volunteer with Carbonate for a while, and we met her, amazing woman, and she sat down and she told us a story about her 4-year-old, and she's been really concerned about what's going on in the world, and she really didn't know what she could do. And so we just started sharing our stories about farmers and about carbon in the soil and how the incredible benefits that what happens when you start thinking about carbon in the soil and biodiversity and beautiful landscapes and she actually just started to cry and she went, oh my God, Helen, I just didn't know that was there. And I said, and it's not just farmers, it's actually each one of us. If you're a mum, you can actually just go and buy some seeds and just start a garden, just get to know, get your little kids and watch that little plant grow. So I suppose my thing would be, if you don't have a garden now, you don't need a big plot, just a little one. My question would be, can I go and buy some seeds? Can I go and buy, a bit of compost? Can I grow something?
Mm.
That's my question.
Yeah, cool. I don't have one. I don't have to because mine was stolen. Have to have one. No, I would just say, I don't quite know. I've got a really boring one. Oh, it's not boring. It's actually really particular. I'm going to have 2 goes, okay? That's my right as the MC. So my internet connection is unstable, it's telling me. My boring one is, but really quite important, is it's actually 4 parts. It's like, what are you going to stop doing? What are you going to start doing? What are you going to do more of? And what are you going to do less of in relation to what you've heard about tonight? Now, whether it's going to, you're going to stop buying crap food or you're going to buy less crap food or, I'm going to start my own garden. I don't know. I don't want to plant too many seeds there. The more broader one is, what do you want to be remembered for? You got to be remembered for someone who contributed to, because this conversation is going to get bigger. This is there'll be more webinars, there'll be more films. There are more people using this language, which is fantastic, and it's become irrelevant in this not movement, but in this world. Because this is becoming a really relevant conversation. So, do you want to be remembered? What do you want to be remembered for? As someone who contributed, or someone who sat there and didn't contribute and died early because you're unhealthy? How's that?
Well, Charlie, I don't want to be remembered for the guy that always took his shirt off for no goddamn reason.
Well, here's your opportunity to make a difference in another way, Khory.
Okay, all right. Helen's accepted.
Helen, I'm going to throw to you now, please, because we're looking at the clock, and I know as one of the people on, I've really enjoyed tonight. I trust that our viewers and those who attended have as well. Helen, do you want to do a wrap up? You want any messages from our sponsors, anything like that?
Look, I think on behalf of Carbonate, we're deeply grateful to Kiss the Ground for providing this film for free. This has been a mammoth journey for them. So we're very grateful to the team at Kiss the Ground. Also, the Parks Shire Council who came up with the DOSH to put this together, really important. And the Australian government, but more so this amazing panel. I think that what we have discussed, and all of you have contributed such wisdom and knowledge and true. Khory, I just melted when I heard you speak, and Rachael and Tammi and Charlie, thank you so much for coming on such short notice. I'm really, really I think it's been a wonderful discussion.
Thanks, Helen and Mike, for pulling this together, actually. For
short notice and wonderful, and thank you for inviting me to contribute. Does anyone want to, because this is a gratuitous opportunity, to plug anyone's upcoming books or podcasts or anything? Does anyone want to use this opportunity?
Well, here's something I prepared earlier. No, but we were talking about visualization, and this is my latest novel. It came out when the pandemic occurred, so I didn't get to go to Margaret River or New Zealand or where we were touring. So it's White Horses, and it's got a property in it called The Planet. And and when you go on the planet, you can feel what Regen Ag looks like, feels like, tastes like. That's me done.
Beautiful.
Sorry, Charlie, I was showing last year's book that the Food Sovereignty Alliance published, Farming Democracy, if you want to hear the stories of small-scale farmers who've been doing this. But I should also, it would be remiss of me not to mention that I'm writing a subject for Southern Cross University for their, it's a grad cert in organic food and nutrition, and I'm writing their subject called Farm Gate to Plate. And it's given me, in fact, I finished the final module today, hours before coming here. And it's kind of given me a chance to brain dump Food Sovereignty 101 into a 6-week intensive subject. So that's Farm Gate to Plate is the subject, and it's in that grad cert of organic nutrition, food and nutrition. So if you want to know kind of the shorthand of everything I think about food sovereignty, it's in that subject.
So go and do the course. Go
do the subject, because that's the only place you can.
That's right. Khory, have you got anything to plug? Are you bringing out a new line of singlets or underpants or anything?
Every guy he's a super smart environmental scientist. Khory, you got to stop the topless thing.
Obviously. Yeah.
There's more to him. There's so much more to him than me.
There's more to me. Thank you, Charlie. There's a lot more to me. Thank you for that.
So much more.
I don't have anything to plug. If you want to have a look at some naked videos and photos, then you can go across my Instagram page.
I thought you were going to say go to my website. And I've only got to plug my podcast, Regenerative Journey. Khory's on there. Everyone who's on the panel is going to get, if they haven't been tapped on the shoulder, they're going to before too long. I've got quite a few in the can, so I'm not doing it right now, but one comes out every Tuesday morning. And hang on, who's coming out on Tuesday? Rachel Ward is coming out on Tuesday. The actress who is just really going hard in this space and bring a whole beautiful perspective to it. Talking about beautiful perspectives, is that our cue to wrap up? Helen, you're the boss.
Yes, I'll just quickly do a plug for our podcast that we launched this week.
Yes.
Yes, so Regenerate, we had the amazing Darren Doherty and Lisa Heenan from Agrarians. It was a fantastic, hilarious discussion. We've got Walter and Judith Schwartz together on a chat, and we're going to ask the question, what do reindeers and water in the sky, rivers in the sky, have to do with each other? So she's just launched her new book about reindeers. So we thought it would be a great conversation to have Walter, and that's a wrap for me. Thank you.
Fantastic. So we might wrap it up. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you panelists on your Friday nights. I can hear the rain gently falling on the roof here at Hannah Minnow. at the moment, so that's very exciting. We were counting on that, and we certainly need it. Not that we don't have feed, we've got a lot of feed, but every little bit counts. So thank you all, and that's a wrap. I think Biggie takes over now, doesn't he? And he wraps it all up. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.